It is, yeah, exactly. Hope I see you on the stream. Let's do this. We are hanging out with Owen Casey Stevens on ThursdAGE. Owen, we are connecting, it looks like, to our YouTubes, our Facebooks, and our Twitches.
I felt like we connected weeks ago, Troy.
Months even, maybe even years.
Well, what is time anymore?
Truth. As our friends start lining up, I want to get a sense of whether they can hear us or not. Do me the good favor of giving me a thumbs up and saying, yes, I do.
All right, so I'm going to fill air with a story which has nothing to do with Fantasy Age, and that way, if there are people here, they get to hear it, and if there aren't, they can listen later. So in 2014, my wife and I moved to Seattle area because I got a job with Paizo, and we had a house in Norman which we were planning on selling, and we had it all emptied out and prettied up. But we weren't here anymore, and it took months for that thing to sell. So we asked a friend of ours, John, who's featured in some of my Storytime videos, to drive by and just keep an eye on it every few weeks, not like on a daily thing or anything, just so, you know, if what half of it burned down or something, we'd know. And one day he sends us an email that says, hey, you guys have a big scaffolding on one side of the house. And we were like, no, we don't. And he's like, yeah, here's a picture. There's a big scaffolding set up all over the chimney. We were like, why on earth is there a scaffolding all over the chimney? We haven't done anything. So we're afraid there's been a safety issue, or for some reason the city is finding us, or I don't know, criminals are breaking into our house so that they can build a 42-mile tunnel to get under a bank vault. We had no idea what was going on. So we're calling around, trying to get a hold of someone in the city to tell us what is going on with the scaffolding, and this city didn't know anything. Meanwhile, John keeps showing us pictures every couple of days, and the scaffolding set up around one end of the house started to show that our chimney was getting stuccoed. We didn't know of any reason why our chimney would get stuccoed. We didn't mind stucco on the chimney. It looked nicer with stucco. It was an upgrade. But we couldn't think of any reason why someone would just show up and start putting stucco on an abandoned house in the middle of Norman, Oklahoma. It was a real mystery. So my wife wrote a note and emailed it to our friend John. John taped it to the scaffolding. And then nothing for a few days. So we're calling the police and telling them we want to report an unauthorized upgrade. Is this some sort of weird, hey, we're going to do work on your house because we see it's abandoned, and then we're going to ask for payment, and then we're going to put a lien on the house, and then we're going to steal it from you? Our minds were racing with what on earth could have caused stucco to get applied clandestinely and without permission to our home 3,000 miles away. So eventually we got a phone call from someone, and he said, hey, I understand that I'm paying to have stucco put on your house. And we were like, well, at least we're talking to someone now. Can you explain to us why stucco is being put on the chimney of our house? And he said, yeah, so you know how you almost sold the house a couple months ago, but the people backed out? We were like, yeah, we know that. He's like, okay, well, we were those people. We were gonna buy it. We really thought we were gonna buy it. We made plans for what we were going to do to it. We flip homes, and we work with a handyman. And so we had him out after we had made an offer on it and you hadn't accepted yet. And we showed him all the stuff we wanted to do, and he does stuff with us all the time, and he knows that we're in a really tight timeline. And then we, at the last moment, decided we didn't want to do that. It was extending ourselves financially too far. So we backed out, and we went on vacation, and we didn't tell him. Now, we never told him to start, right? We never told him you should now start working on the house, but he knew we were on a tight timeline. Suddenly he couldn't get a hold of us. And so to make sure our plans to flip the house were not ruined, he took it on his own to begin stuccoing the chimney of your house. We were like, well, that's fascinating. So here's where we are. We don't want a half stuccoed chimney, right? Because we want to be able to sell this house. And the person was being very polite, very reasonable. He said, no. We told her to stop to her to talk to you. Here's what we would like to do. We would like to finish stuccoing the chimney for you and not charge you for it and apologize for any concerns we may have caused. So we were like, okay, we just want a formal document stating that you are not charging us for the stuccoing of the house, that was done in error and that this person did it, so we can pass those on to the next person. And it officially became a housewarming gift for whoever bought the house from us. And lo and behold, a couple weeks after the chimney was stuccoed, someone bought the house. So my chimney was accidentally stuccoed for 2 weeks while I was 3,000 miles away. And that just shows you how weird life is.
Life is pretty weird. I'm getting good vibes from people who are listening. Folks, you can hear me and I'm not screaming or roboting. Let me know if you do hear that, and I will be very excited if you say, just shine me on. Like, if you don't even hear me, just pretend like you do. You know how that works. I'm sending all my psychic vibes. But nice, excellent. Well, I want to say hello to the Games Tavern, who is watching through Twitch. Also, Aztec Platypus is here. Jason Sunday says, you sound good to me. Jacob says, audio is good. All right, well, look at that, Owen. Can you even?
If the audio is good, I'm delighted. That's frequently the tricky part of getting these, right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so that is a hilarious story, and it's just one of the many features, I'll say, of this particular program, which is ThursdAGE with Owen Casey Stevens, and we hang out and we talk, Fantasy Age, because you're the lead developer for Fantasy Age, as well as a manifold list of things that you do in this world. And today we're talking about, you said villains, and I love a good villain. I mean, I love a good villain. Clever, fun, all that kind of good stuff.
I think villains are a important and often not carefully enough thought about element of role-playing games. And obviously, if you've got an encounter and it says, hey, there are 5 bandits and the bandits want your pie, you're an orc, you have a pie, and 5 people try and take your pie from you, those are the villains. But that is just that's a simple description of a mechanical role, and you could really make villains so much more interesting than just how do the players encounter them and what are they trying to do in that moment. So I think it's worth talking about what makes good villains, how do you make villains more interesting, how do you use villains, and obviously we are happy to answer everyone's villainous or villain related, I suppose, questions. Although if you have villainous questions, we'll cover those as well. And for that matter, if you have any questions, this show's here for you folks. We're not doing it for our health. This show exists so that you can interact with us and talk to us, so that there's a permanent record of me talking about stucco. So
that's
if
true.
you have any questions at all, even if they're off topic, please let us know.
Yeah, that's true. And if you've got some sort of stucco based villain that you'd like to describe or have Owen stat, we can do that as well. Jason Wallman, hello. Mark Heron says, good audio. Okay, great. That's good. Hey, Rain's over on YouTube. We are, I don't know if you know this, Owen, but we're broadcasting across all platforms right now. People
I did not know that.
Yeah, kind of snuck those in the last couple streams, and I'm pretty pleased with myself. But with that being said, I find that there is sort of an interesting thing that happens with villainy, that there is sort of that, I'm a clever villain, I've got a puzzle for you to kind of unwrap, and or I'm kind of deeply disturbed, sort of like a Joker-esque kind of villain, or I am, you're trying to steal my pie, I'm an orc, you're coming and you're just smashing things up, and it's sort of like that more ham-handed kind of thing. What are some other, are those broad categories? Does that cover it? Am I missing something when it comes to good villain?
Yeah, that doesn't even begin to cover it, which is good, because we've still got 49 minutes of program to go through. So one of the things that I think is worth thinking about is that whether or not your villain is a bad guy. And that can be nuanced. There's a wonderful line in Wreck-It Ralph where a bunch of video game villains are in a support group, and someone says, "Just because we're bad guys doesn't mean we're bad guys." Um, so, for example, if the villain, rather than being a true master of evil, Darth, is simply a antagonist, there are a lot of ways you can have the villain not be a bad person in and of their own right. For example, you can have your villain be a rival. If the group wants to accomplish something and someone else wants to accomplish it, and only one person can accomplish that thing, like being the first person to explore an area, the other group that is competing with you are the villains of that piece. But as long as they're not, trying to poison or murder you in order to prevent you from getting there, they're not necessarily villainous. They're just the antagonists in a race. If everyone's playing fair, uh, they're not bad people just because they're trying to prevent you from getting your goal because they want to get theirs. And that's another place where you can play with some really interesting nuance. If you're doing something like, hey, the first person to discover a pass through the mountains gets the contract and the gold and gets all the parties. And so multiple groups are doing it. And then you can have, well, there are several groups you don't have to worry about. They're not going to be competent enough to be competition. In fact, you may end up having to save them, in which case they are kind of obstacles or hazards, because you have to decide, well, are we going to save them from freezing to death, which is going to slow us down, or are we going to become the villains and let them die so that we got a better chance at accomplishing our mission? And then you can have a couple of groups that are about as good as you and reasonably competent and otherwise fine people, right? Like if there's a snowstorm, you may all sit around the same campfire in a cave and trade stories until the snowstorm's over. And then you can have the Dirk Dastardly group who are perfectly happy to poison you and try and trap you in an avalanche and steal the goats of a Cyclops, so the Cyclops attacks you. And then now the Cyclops is the villain, but the Cyclops is just defending its stuff. So you have to decide, are we just going to kill this Cyclops, or are we going to try and talk to it? Or do we now have to convince it we're not the people that took its goats? We are, in fact, the goat police, and we're going to stop the other group if you'll just not smash us with your giant club. So there are a lot of different ways that you can take the same setup. And even if what you're doing is saying these are all people that are going to oppose you within this setup, there's a whole range of different kinds of villainy that you can pull out. On top of the sort of psychopath villain, which there's a certain value to having the psychopath villain, the person that's just totally off their rocker and out to do bad things for bad things sake, because they're easy to motivate, right? They're trying to kill everyone who's the age of 39. Why? Because they want to. There's no reason behind that. But you don't want to do a lot of those. First of all, because it begins to seem like the world is unstable or there's something in the water. Like, I have to wonder if Batman has considered just having Wayne Industries check the water treatment plant in Gotham, because it seems like that might do at least as much good as sitting on top of a gargoyle and brooding. But ignoring that, right? You've got like your villains who know that they're villains, but feel everyone who isn't a villain is a fool. Like, if you look at Star Wars, you've got your Darth Vaders and your Emperor Palpatines. Yes, they are out to claim power and be in charge and conquer everything for themselves, but they see that as the natural, normal progression. And they don't blame you if you're opposing them, but they will crush you. You also have people who are villains, but think they're right, who don't consider themselves to be villains. And this is the sort of thing that you will frequently see in crime stories, where if someone is a vigilante and the straight local cops are going, you're not doing it by the book, and they're like, well, but justice is more important. And that's where you can have a philosophical disagreement that can lead to someone being the villain. Or you can have things like, if someone is a member of the Imperial Guard and they took an oath and they're loyal and they're obeying the legally given orders of their emperor, they may see what they're doing as the right thing to do. And if you are rebelling against the status quo, which is frequently necessary if you want to improve the world, they may say that there's a system in place and these people were given power and this is how society works. So you're the villain for rebelling against it, even if you're trying to make the world a better place. And I'm the hero for trying to stop you. And when you present things that way, you give very different elements for players to play off of and work with and even possibly appreciate, right? I've always sort of liked the Moriarty Sherlock Holmes stories where one of the things they may do is get together and play chess or have a cup of tea, or right, they're
Right.
nemesis, they are opposed to one another, but they're also both working within the society. And then when they aren't at the moment, they are hammer and tongs against each other. They'll sit down and socialize, and they do it because they're trying to get the other one to slip up
It's still part of the game. Yeah, it's still part of
right.
that,
It's
yeah,
also part of the game,
conquest. Yeah.
but it's a different level, right? If you don't ever see Batman and the Joker sitting down to tea because one of them is a raving madman.
But there are those moments though where you can see like Joker almost talks about, Batman just broods silently or, punches him in the noggin, but Joker will always kind of have this will speak to almost a relationship between them, like, there is no you without me, there's no me without
Yeah,
you, that kind of a thing. It feels shades of what Moriarty and Sherlock are about.
it's a really interesting trope, and different writers handle it different ways, right? I mean, my favorite take on that is always that the Joker feels like he is important to Batman, and Batman feels like the Joker's a madman, and that's a one-sided relationship.
Right, yeah,
And
unrequited,
we
sure.
certainly we have certainly seen in the real world people can convince themselves that they are an important part of a relationship when it just isn't the case. Um, the other kind of villain we can get into going on that is the villain who is in fact both a good guy and not actually doing anything wrong. They're just annoying. The most common version of this trope is the bard who is singing the hero's praises, right? They're not breaking the law. They're talking about how great you are. They're just annoying. They make sure that all of your tactics are included in songs. They get a lot of the
Right.
details wrong. They cause, they talk about you fought some bandits, but they turn the bandits into an entire army from another country because they want you to sound good. And then that country now thinks that you're opposed to them because there's a song talking about how you stopped them from an invasion that they never even attempted. Um, and especially if the bard, is a little off key sometimes, or pestering you for more details, or there are lots of ways that you can have that character be a foil, an antagonist, a thing that people have to deal with, where they don't even feel like we can just kill this guy. Um, I I
I do
am
feel
a
like you might be just, not to derail you, but I feel like you might have described myself in that.
oh no, heavens no,
I'm
absolutely
definitely
not.
the off key bard, that is irritating, but I kind of do that as a, kind of on purpose. Um, Jason Sunday says, Batman and Joker are soulmates. I know that they get into a little bit more of a granular explanation or sort of, the espousing of sort of the plot points and the emotional texture in the comic books for sure. Let's see. Stan says, but you sometimes see Batman having tea with Ra's al Ghul. Is that?
Yeah, Ra's al Ghul is the demon's head, head of the
Yeah.
League of Assassins, is a great example of a very different kind of villain than the Joker, and he is arguably still insane, but his insanity is a more just a second. That was getting out of control. His insanity is a more rational kind of insanity, where he wants to take over the world because he thinks the world is a mess, and obviously only he can be trusted to run it. And in fact, he wants, in many of the stories, he wants Batman to take over his job when Ra's is gone,
Right.
which is another case of building a relationship that can be pretty one-sided. Um, yeah, the other interesting things about some villains is that sometimes you can't oppose them for political reasons, right? Like the advisor to the king, or the vizier, or the head prelate is frequently someone who's in a position of power, and they are advising people in power to do something you don't think they should do, so that you're your competition there. And they might be, if they're Cardinal Richelieu and the Musketeers, they might be genuinely villainous, but at the same time, in the classic stories, Richelieu is trying to out the truth about what's going on, And by opposing him, the Musketeers are trying to help out their friends, but they are also opposing the actual power struggle. So frequently it's really useful to see what your players are interested in promoting and defending, and that can help you build interesting opponents that will oppose what the players want in multiple ways. I've had more than one campaign where, sure, the heroes are going out and there are fire drakes which are setting fire to the crops and destroying everything, and they're like packs of wolves. They're dangerous and you got to kill them. But what the players are really involved with is whether or not there's going to be new funding for the orphanage, because they saved some children after their parents were killed and took them to the orphanage, and the orphanage was terrible. And so they're trying to use some of their funds to get the orphanage put back together, but the orphanage is under the control of some patron in town, and they like skimming money off the top and feel that it's better for the children to have hard times because that will prepare them for life. And that can become a place where the players are like, yeah, we go kill the fire drakes. That's great. How are things going with the orphanage? Have we convinced anyone to support us? Can we build our own orphanage? Is there a space for that? What are the rules? Can we take over? And so you sort of see where your players go with something and build appropriate opposition for that, and try and change it up. Try and have, we got one Joker guy, we've got a Ra's al Ghul, we've got, even Commissioner Gordon or Captain Bullock can be considered villains in many Batman stories because they are opposing this vigilante.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's interesting too. I'm thinking about the villain you choose, or the villain you choose to sort of, as the GM, to kind of present in various different ways, whether it's like you've come across the story of a thing about a thing, and it leads you to this sort of this epic battle. It's sort of it strikes me that the recipe for this is like small quests and hints of a thing and hints of a thing, and then you get to the bigger thing. Is it often, from your perspective, is there ever just like, we're just straight up just going out and killing monsters, that's it, there's no big...
Absolutely. That's very much about where you are in the game and what the purpose of the game is and what your group is like. When I am starting a campaign, I like to start for the first several game sessions with the players having some very clear choices that aren't morally or tactically difficult. As an example, the most recent campaign I started, a Really Wild West game, which is fantasy, high magic, Martian weird tech in 1891 Earth with lots of different species. I start all the players by saying, I need you to have a reason to be on a train headed west. So all the players had a reason for that. And then people attacked the train and were trying to kill everyone on the train. That makes it super easy for the players. Okay, these are evil, dark magic using bandits who have stopped the train, want to steal something from the train, and want to kill everyone on the train, including us. There's not a big moral quandary. The bad guys are very clear cut, so you've got an easy starting point. And then you move to the next step. Okay, well, they were obviously trying to steal something. We stopped them from stealing it, less because we cared whether they stole it or not, more because we didn't want to get shot. And then the person who wants to thank you for that thing not being stolen talks to you, and then you see what the players care about. But there's absolutely a place for just saying, hey, this is a creature hunters campaign. I need you to go out and kill 20 fire drakes because there's a bounty on their head, and we'll just go out and stomp about, and it's enough of a dangerous world out there that there's plenty of that to do. On my blog, OwenKCStevens.com, I've got the World of THAGE, F-A-G-E, which is obviously Fantasy Age, but whatever, where I carefully set it up, where there are adventuring guilds and lots and lots and lots of dangerous places, so that you can do what has almost become a Japanese anime trope, although obviously it grows out of D&D, of just going to the adventuring guild and saying, okay, we would like a job appropriate for us. And the guild can say, okay, you're copper level adventurers. Here are all the copper level adventures. There are cultist goblins trying to break open a tomb, but the local farmers would like you to stop them. And you can just go out, stop them, come back. Great. We dealt with that one thing. There's no carryover. It doesn't affect there's no overarching plot. What's our next thing? Well, the next thing is you got to clear out dire rats from the sewer. Great, dire rats from the sewer. You go do that. And there is nothing wrong with that. all of my advice tends to lean towards a sort of evolving long form campaign style, because that is what I enjoy the most as a game master, what I enjoy the most as a player. And I am currently in multiple role-playing games with the same people that I have been gaming with on and off for 37 years.
I
So
like that.
we have a we have a tendency to know what do we like, what do we not like, what kinds of things do we want to get. So we've involved a process. But that process does not necessarily apply if your primary form of gaming is I grab my Fantasy Age books, I go to the local game store now that is safe again, and we're all fully vaccinated. We sit down at a table and I say, hey, where are 4 people who would like to play this game tonight? In which case you're not going to have that whole develop extremely long tropes and see what they're up to, and you've got to have a set experience that you can put out before them. And that's one of the places where villainous archetypes can be so useful, sort of iconic villain ideas.
Yeah.
You know, if you say there's a necromancer wrapped in a black cloak with a skull face and a staff that drips blood, and he's at the edge of town, sure, that could just be the high priest of the god of everything creepy, and he's actually a great guy. But you're using the imagery of a villain, and I don't like to pull the rug out from under people, right? If I've done that imagery and there's no reason to think he's actually a friendly guy that you can sit down and eat honey cakes with, then I think it's appropriate when you show him to players, look, this looks like a villain. Now he's acting like a villain, that
Right.
he probably better be a villain.
You know, it's interesting you bring up honey cakes, because that's what I call our chat. Like, people who participate in the chat, I call them my little honey cakes.
Our honey cakes.
Our little honey cakes. And let's see, you know, Ray, I think Ray was speaking about this specifically as it relates to the, you know, players who, you know, are taking over the orphanage, you know, that they've, you know, or they've decided to, they've slain the evil tavern owner who was really a demon in disguise, and now they're going to run a tavern, you know, like that kind of stuff happens a lot. And I've done that in a few of my D&D adventures for sure. Let's see here. I like this idea that we've got this sort of thing going on right now about that you had brought up the bard who's, you know, singing all your, you know, triumphs and all that stuff, and giving away all of your secrets, but then also like there's a notion of like an actual evil bard, like, you know, summoning, you know, a heavy metal bard. I see a reference to. I like Jason's Jason Sunday talks about goblin ninjas attack the train. Like that's sort of like
yeah,
why not?
exactly that. I the evil bard can be a fascinating trope, especially since so many people don't take bards seriously, and obviously we've got a bard specialization for Fantasy Age. One of the great things you can do with any evil information source, be that a bard or a sage or a scholar, or if you're going to a slightly more advanced information level in your society, the evil reporter or evil editor and publisher, right?
Sure.
Is that they can spread lies about you. If you come into town and people see you and they're grabbing your children and pulling them back, and people are closing their businesses, and that's all because that one guy that you beat to the punch in the previous race, he's an evil bard, and he's told a song about all the people you killed and murdered and poisoned in order to get that victory, and he's poisoning the town against you, and you know, depending on where you are and what the local rules are, that may or may not be something that you can do anything about legally, so that you have to decide how much are we willing to put up with. And B, that's a case where you can constantly run into the sign that this villain is messing with you without the villain being there to punch in the face at that moment. One of the secrets I've had when I do want a long-term villain, a villain that is going to be out in the campaign for quite a while, so the players can learn about them and grow to hate them, is to keep that villain not on the same battle mat as the players as much as possible.
Right.
Because as soon as the villain is on the same scene with the heroes, there is a decent and reasonable chance, the way role-playing games go, that they're going to say, you know what, heck with the consequences. We know he's a bad guy. We know he's trying to destroy the compact of the Three Crowns, whatever. We're just going to jump him and kill him, and we'll deal with the consequences later. But if they discover, okay, there is a secret society known as the Blood Mark, and the Blood Mark want to end certain bloodlines, and they're trying to kill them all off, and the king of the Bloodmark is trying to assassinate us, and we don't even know who that is, but all of his agents have this ring with a drop of blood on it, then they can be facing this villain and his machinations and his working against them, and they can really grow to loathe the guy or gal without ever having run into him. And then you can build things to a crescendo, and your climax can be, okay, you've finally gotten there, here he is. And one of the things I like to do with things like that is to try and make the machinations or agents of that villain distinctive. In Fantasy Age, one of the really fascinating things you can do if you want to do something like that, I mean, there are lots of visual things you can do, right? Like we all know what a ninja looks like, roughly speaking. If the Bloodmark all have a secret blood drop tattoo or ring on them, then if we defeat them in combat, we can say, oh yeah, these are those guys. But there are also things like stunts and arcana you can use. So if, for example, there was an evil organization that was trying to change fate and destroy you, you could say, hey, these are the only people that have access to the curse arcana from the Trojan War supplement, that it's Fantasy Age compatible. I've picked that up. So anytime someone starts using curse magic, the players will know, oh, they're part of that secret society. Or you can say, hey, these villains have a specific maneuver where they step up and put one foot on your knee and then do a backflip and kick you in the face so that you both take damage and are knocked down. And that is a 3-point stunt. And so that this 3-point stunt I've created is only available to people trained by this master martial artist. Right. Yeah. So you come up with these signatures, and Fantasy Age has some really fascinating elements that you can make the signature, so players will see that and grow familiar with it. And they may even, they might become excited. Hey, I really want to learn curse magic. Well, okay, now not only do we want to defeat this villain, but we want to find his power source of the signature that we've created for him. And that allows players to interact with the ideas of a villain at multiple levels.
Jason Waltman brings up something that's kind of interesting in that idea of there being, the switcheroo evil, right? You think there's something evil going on. You see the low level, bandit or whatever. I think that's what there's an outlaw commits a crime and, is doing something evil, but is doing it in defense of or to prevent a greater evil. How often do you play with that kind of switchbacks, like kind of those zigzagging, targets?
I personally try to be very, very careful about them. If I set them up, I try to reveal them as something that the characters know and the players know, even if they can't prove it or act on it yet, really early. Because I personally go to role-playing for fun escapism, and dealing with not knowing who the bad guy is and being afraid that every decision I make might make things worse feels too much like reality for me.
Fair enough.
There are absolutely groups who are super excited by that sort of high level of intrigue. And if you're doing a game that's more about we're a whole bunch of information gatherers for the king, or we're a secret society whose job is, we are the dim Illuminati, the Diminati. We're not that well known, and we're slowly trying to take over the world, but we're a small group at the moment. You can play with those things more if the players seem to enjoy it. But I love it as a trope, right? So it's something that you can easily set up and say, hey, the government is the legit official authorized government of the area, and it's mostly okay, but here's this rogue element of it that no one else is willing to do anything with, or they don't believe that it's that rogue. Maybe the Black Veil Guard, who are supposed to protect us from necromancers, are in fact themselves necromancers, and they keep doing things to make us think we're constantly under attack, so their budget's big. And so there are paladins out there who are attacking and killing Black Veil Guardsmen illegally because they're trying to put an end to this evil. And then you let the players in on that before they've had a chance to do something they'll significantly regret. That's how I like to handle that idea. But it's still a fun trope, and then you can set things up so that, and then you have to ask, well, are all Black Veil Guardsmen bastards, or is it just some? And then maybe we get an ally within them who's like, they're going too far, but there really are ancient dwarven tombs under this town, which for some reason the founding fathers decided to build an entire city on. So every once in a while, an undead beard comes out of the sewers and tries to strangle people, and we have
an
to deal with
undead
that.
beard.
Yeah, if you've got dwarven tombs, right, then their beards absorb.
Yes.
I'm just throwing ideas out there,
Oh
right? I
yeah, no,
mean,
I love
it's
it. I love it. I mean, I
so
just want
it
to,
turns itself into if it's coming up from the tombs through the sewers, then it's like a evil hair clog, right? And it can strangle people, and you have to use fire against it. And
absolutely. Well, so listen to this. One of the things I slap my microphone out of its stand. One of the things I enjoy about this is when we're talking about sort of the finer points of of the artistry behind tabletop role play games, playing and GMing and all of that. I often see that Rain kind of snaps right in there and understands kind of and gets a sense of how that stuff works. I'm looking at this. Rain talks about having done that very same thing you were talking about, that signature move, and what they did is they entropy magic from Dragon Age and had a group of villains
uh-huh.
use those spells. I love that. I know that Rain has a podcast, and believe it's Rain. Would you provide a link to your podcast in the chat? I think it's
Please do
the
that.
yeah, it's on Age. It's on the Adventure Game Engine, I believe. But yeah, educate us because I think we should get Owen and some of our Age developers hanging out with you and talking uh, tabletop roleplay development. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Apuk
I
says
agree. I love that idea.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, fantastic. The Apuk says the undead bears are symbiotes that kill you and then take over your body. Beards, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Apuk
And
says bears, but well, yeah, we're going there.
Troy, we've got a piece of Stan cartoon art now.
Oh yes, excellent. I will grab that. Let's see. Ranges we're obviously behind on the posted shows versus what we've recorded, but I'm pretty proud of what we have. Phenomenal. Yeah, looking forward to seeing that link, my friend, and then we'll set up some time for you and some Age developers to hang out. Now, Owen, with villainy comes, what's the word I'm looking for? Trouble. And oftentimes people, I do like to think about how we are evolving as a culture to coordinate our engagements so that we are taking into account the people around the table. But there's going to be issues like you'll have that player who is suddenly who's in your party and acting suddenly villainous because they've decided to take on a new role, or they've they're gonna play these things a little rough. You've got villains that are sensitive, like that it inspire an emotion that isn't pleasant or fun, or isn't a fun kind of stress or friction. Talk to me about both how you identify that stuff and beyond we've talked a lot about like setting the ground rules and saying, hey, this is the kind of group that we're running, so understand that when you're bringing your creative stuff, we're working from within this palette. But beyond that, people sometimes take a weird left turn, or confusion sets in, and folks don't immediately know what's what. um, can you describe some things that you have either seen or encountered, or sort of advise people when they run into that kind of trouble?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is, and this is a change from me when I was younger. If the problem is out of the campaign world, right? If the problem is a mismatch of expectations or a mismatch of attitude, uh, or just being inconsiderate or being undereducated on the part of the GM or the players rather than on the part of characters, then deal with that outside of the game world. I have I wrote the advanced game mastery manual for the D20 era for Green Ronin, and one of the things I talked about there were intensity pushers, which are people that when you say, "Hey, we're only going to go into this level of detail about what happens to people when you kill them," and then you've got a person who's constantly like, "Well, I'm going to gut them and see if they swallowed any valuables and chop their fingers off, and hey, we can cut them into pieces and sell them to local butcher and claim that it's pigs," and that is making people uncomfortable because they are constantly pushing level of intensity of unpleasant elements forward. You can't fix that by having NPCs in the game say, "Now you shouldn't be butchering people and selling them as if they were pork." You got to talk to the player. You got to talk to the GM. You can still have appropriate actions occur in character, but that's for role playing purposes. If it's corrective to the behavior of the players and the GM, that's got to occur as a conversation, not during game time. I am a big fan of making sure that everyone agrees that we are all there to make sure that everyone is having fun. I am unimpressed by the claim, you can't be mad at me for my character doing this terrible thing that made everyone uncomfortable, because that's what my character would do. Because the response is, yeah, but you chose to play a character who would do that. These are fictions, and we are all responsible for the fictions we create and represent. Sometimes it's a matter of not having thought about something or not being aware of what makes people uncomfortable. To tell a story on myself, I am a big fan of describing horrible, creepy, crawly, bug-like things in games that I'm running as a GM. I created an entire species of evil things called Spanthy, which the players named because Spanthy was short for spider ant thing, because they just had way too many legs and fangs. And when people would shiver and go, "Oh God, don't go into that level of detail," as a younger GM, I would take that to mean, "Ooh, I'm getting a reaction," which is what I want, right? So I would go into even more detail, which was me being a jerk.
Right.
If people are saying, "Oh my God, that's terrible," tell me more. That's one thing. But if they're saying, "Oh, dude, I actually hate spiders and you're creeping me out and I think I'm going to have to go vomit," that is not a sign to double down. And so and some people I still play with occasionally and see often, have real arachnophobia. If I don't know that, and I put out 4 spider miniatures that I painted to be as realistic as possible, I haven't done anything wrong. If they scream and run away, and then I refuse to alter what I'm doing, and especially if I keep putting the spiders in more and more and more, that's me being a jerk. So, you know, if you've got serious arachnophobia, it's probably not a bad idea to tell people you're playing with that. But I don't want to put it on the players to have to constantly mention the things that they don't think that are going to come up, they're going to bother them.
Right.
One of my long-term friends had a real thing about damage to hands and fingers. I mean, it was a real issue with him, and he'd gamed for years and he had just never had that come up. And so then in one game of mine, someone got a critical hit against his character, and I'm describing the sound of the bones in his hand breaking as a mace hit it on a critical hit. And he got genuinely upset because he'd never had that kind of experience. And we talked it out and we worked it out. And I knew, I can say, "Hey, you've taken a critical hit to the hand. It won't work now." But he was not the person. If he's in the group, don't go into that level of loving detail. So,
yeah.
All that said, also look out for bad actors. There are unfortunately people who are, the common parlance is griefers, but people who enjoy making other people unhappy or uncomfortable. And my gaming table just doesn't have room for that.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the term zombeards. That is so good.
Zombeard is perfect.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. Stan says, thank God I finished that drawing. Just as you said, undead beard.
So I got to tell you, when I described the undead beard, my wife LJ, sitting right across from me, looked at me and said, "Please tell me Stan's listening."
Here, let me show you. I like it. I love it. That's so good. My goats. They stole my goats. Totes my goats. I do want a tote that has a goat, and I want to. Oh, look, it's Duke. Duke, hello, friend. I'm so glad you're here. Brian Irving says, I usually ask new players if they have any phobias, and if they do, I cut that out of any plans. I mean, honestly, truly. And just, I do think that there is a moment of, like, check yourself just as the person who's providing this experience. You're not there to coach someone through their fears. It's not like, I will help them become a better person. Like,
No.
this shouldn't be a big deal. And, don't even, yeah, it's not even worth it. One of the things I like that Rain says is, my party's good without spiders. That's an awesome perspective. Like, rather than say, oh, my party's good with this level of horror, it's like, no, they're good without it. Like, I mean, like, I think that that's an important sort of mindset that for Brain's uh, adventure, they defaulted to beetles, and beetles are way cooler. I agree. Let's see. Yeah, Brian Irving says I have one campaign with no spiders in it, and another with no snakes. I mean, yeah, people have that issue for sure. And
And to
go ahead.
to link that to villainy real quick,
Yeah.
one of the things I have run into sometimes is someone, as a game master, will want to indicate how terrible and villainous someone is by going into extreme detail of the terrible things they've done, and can make people uncomfortable discussing things that don't need to be part of a entertainment experience, right? That there are, yes, he's a bad guy, we get it, and he's therefore, he or she or it have done these terrible things, and if describing those terrible things or even acknowledging those terrible things are part of his villainy upsets your player, that is, the player being upset is more important. That is a
Then
bigger
the
deal
story. Yeah.
than the story you wanted to tell, about Vlad the Impaler, right? If impaling is something that people don't want to hear about, especially if you're getting into detail about what orifice the impalement starts in and how long it takes to go through and the sound it makes.
Oh.
Being a descriptive GM, yeah, see, being a descriptive GM is a great and important tool, but use it wisely.
And I also think too that, like, there's some shorthand when you're talking about the gore stuff, and I think that you know the reality for me is when you talk about some of this, the emotionally challenging stuff, and the um, you know people aren't they don't enter this world with an affinity for gore. I mean, like, it's not like, and maybe there are, certain, that creates a villain, I presume, but people aren't coming to hang around with you at your home, or, around a table, digital or otherwise, so that you can describe to them horrible things. Like, make it visceral, make it interesting, give it some texture, but do you have to go into the sound that it makes? Like, probably not.
Um,
Um,
Yeah, well, and sound can be an important thing, but again, use it wisely. One of the most frightening moments I ever had in a role playing game was, when I was with several other low level adventurers, and we have found a cave, and there are bones scattered in front of the cave, and the game master just talks about there being this deep breathing, and when the breathing
oh,
is an
yeah.
inhale, we feel breath, the air moving past us into the cave, cool, crisp air. And then when he exhales, there's this rumble and warm air comes out, but we can't see what's going on.
I love that.
Those sounds were important, but I was like, I don't know what's in there. Is it warm because this is a fire breathing dragon, or is it just a really big lunged bear, or what's going on? Um, so those are cases where I really wanted, oh god, uh, I wanted that input, uh, but in a way that is not creeping anyone out badly.
I want to add a couple thoughts here. Just I'm looking at Duke, absolutely right. We touched on this just a little bit before you had jumped in the conversation. We're glad you're here. It's the session zero is really important, but we were kind of even saying, like, you can do that session zero, and if you're in a long term campaign, you might not have revisited those
Yeah.
those ground rules. So it's important. Or if, let's say, you add a new person mid adventure, that happens quite a bit. Brian F. Irving says, I'm looking forward to yeah, I always recall the necromancer in one of the Riddick films who simply says, I've done terrible things in the name of a faith that was never my own. That really does sum it up in a
Yeah.
very, and it's like, I mean, a very succinct way of a person, for a person to sort of admit their, who they are as a person. But it also just
And
has many
venue matters.
layers.
If
Yes.
if you're running a game for people that you've never met before, at the local library, um, maybe go ahead and think about, hey, what are things that could upset people, and I will just skip those for the moment. You don't have to pull out your most horrific card at every moment.
You don't.
Troy,
I've got
we
it. I've got it. I'm
okay, and
grabbing it right
that one's
now.
from Jacob. We may also get one
Jacob,
from
you.
Stan, but
Okay, excellent. This is yes, this is wow. I love it. We are bringing you Zombeard here momentarily. Yeah, and the other thing as well is just any sort of non-consensual anything. Just don't. Just don't do it. Just stop it dead in its tracks.
and a bunch of people in the thread are talking about specific safety tools and communication methods they use for their games. I'm not going to break this into a show about that,
No, yeah.
but they are out there, right? You can look
Yeah.
up RPG safety tool and and check with your players what they're comfortable with. The one thing I want to note is that I personally find it much more effective to engage in sort of a don't do anything extreme without running it by people, instead of saying, if I do something too extreme, people will stop me. That's putting the onus on someone to raise their hand and say, hey,
Good
even though
point.
everyone seems okay with that, I'm not. And that's rough for them socially. So I prefer to sort of have a baseline and then say, hey, if I have maybe someone's got a thing about evil beard hair, right? If I say, hey, I've got a plot that's going to involve evil hair and being choked to death by clogs and sewers, does anyone have an issue with that? Is everyone okay with that? Really, is what you can open with. And here we have the art of the Zombeard.
Yes, the
People
evil
can tell you
hair.
beforehand. And if I had done an
So
entire
good.
adventure with Zombeards, and it's a great piece, Jacob Blackman did that one. If I'd done an entire plot with Zombeards and people were freaked out about it, I can take that exact write up, right, and make them the infused pallbearer cloths, the pall that goes over the coffin, and just use the same rules. And now it's not beard hair.
I like it. Yeah, I'm looking at this. Zombeard is. I really enjoy Zombeard. I think there's. I mean, I think Zombeard could be the mascot for ThursdAGE.
Yeah, let's not. I would much rather stick with honey cakes.
Well, honey cakes always will be a part of that because we have our honey cakes in the chat, like Mark Karen, who says awesome undead ZZ Top. That's right. It's got legs. Let's see. Oh yeah, I wanted to touch on Brain's comment on the on audio stuff. Like I love that people are doing this, and I know that there's some great soundtracks and some especially things that happen and my proclivity for loving and being so good at audio. I'm wondering if have you used like tracks like that? Have you done that kind of stuff to sort of set atmosphere and mood and tone?
I absolutely have. And one of the things that was specifically mentioned is Sirenscape, who I want to call out both because I feel Sirenscape do a really good job, but also because Sirenscape has, Mutants and Masterminds sound groups. So they're a partner of us here at Green Room Games, Green Room Publishing. Yeah, I do it all the time. I usually run a game as the GM with my laptop. It lets me have a different tab for every different thing that I might want to pull up. So in addition to using professional gaming soundboards, I will also sometimes just look up noises on YouTube and play those. I did a pair of house cats screaming at each other the other day, and the cats aren't injured, they're just upset. But I played that when people were in a cave and I just needed some cougar-like creatures to be outside being unhappy. And so I played that, and it's like, you literally hear this. And then I can have, if a player is like, okay, well, I've got wilderness lore or whatever, can I identify what that is? Is that a person screaming? Is that a cat screaming? Is that a zombeard that is really squeaky sliding down the rock? What is that noise? So I love doing that, and I think it's a great tool. If as a GM you enjoy it, and if the players like having it in. Sometimes people find it disruptive, and certainly I like to click a few and then move on. I don't want the game to grind to a halt as I try and find hey, I
The
wanted
right.
this to be tavern background noise 16, and I'm only finding tavern background noise 15. Uh, but uh, as with anything, the more you do it, the easier it gets to do it quickly and smoothly.
I feel actually semi. I, I laughed at this comment, but then I realized what it says about me. But Jacob Luckman says, "Honey cake's big. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not small. No, no, no."
Yeah.
I knew exactly what that was from. And if you don't know what that's from, then you are young. And if you do, then you are old, like me.
Well,
Um,
and
yeah, go ahead.
we literally just had that conversation. Okay, and now we have another Zombeard, this one from Stan.
Oh
So
my
this is a
gosh.
art heavy episode.
It really is, which is good. I gotta tell you, I'm just a little bit on the slow side today, slower than the norm, but this is so good.
My wife is literally getting up and walking around to look at each piece of art as it comes in.
So good, so good. Okay,
So
hang on one minute.
obviously, this idea, if you'll pardon the term, has legs, and we'll have to.
Yeah, I think we'll have to do a thing.
Well,
Uh,
if people would like to see like a Fantasy Age or Age System in general Patreon that might, for example, give you stats for Zombeards, that's a thing that you should let us know by sending a note to let's play at greenronine.com.
that's right. That is right. I love it. I'm going to hold on one second and gosh, these artists are so good. They just do a thing. And now I also think that there's something like I feel like this. I'm not sure how scared I would be of this.
Well,
It sort of looks like it's laughing real hard.
so here's speaking of what we're doing for this show, here's the relevant thing. These are two takes on the same concept, right? These are both undead zombie beards.
Right.
Jacobs creeps me right the smooth out, especially the fact that, quite anatomically correct, there's no lower part of the jaw, so the beard can be seen through there, but also it's lumpy and angry. Stan's amuses me. So how you present a villain can have a great deal to do with the kind of impact that that villain will have on the game and on the players, and how much it, for example, creeps people out. So I think it is beautiful that we have two different takes on the same off the cuff comment from me, so that we can look at those and say, here are examples uh, of different takes on the same monster. Here's a way to see whether or not something is going to be frightening or amusing or creepy or whatever.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's great, and I think that both artists know their audience for sure. Well, listen, my friend, we are about 1 minute away from being done. We started on time with audio, with a great topic, with a great, a great collection of honey cakes hanging out in the chat. And
Is that going to be official now, or are we going to give up
I don't know if
on
I can
Thursday Aliens and
stop.
go with honey cakes?
I
Honey
think
cakes seems
it seems a little intimate.
I but it's not. It's honey cakes. I think we may have to see if we use honey cakes next week, and if we do, that'll be official.
Okay, well, we will at least go into the lexicon because I do like Thursday Aliens, but honey cakes just seem so sweet. Well, friends, I want to say everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being, our pals, our honey cakes, if you will. Jason Wilma says, "Say goodnight, Owen."
Good night, Owen.
Yeah, exactly. Owen, thank you for hanging out as well. A very interesting discussion, and I think I've learned a lot about our folks who tune in. But remember to tune in to this very same space, no matter if you're on Twitch, the YouTubes, or on Facebook Live. We will be here Monday for Mutants and Masterminds Monday. And we'll have a lot of fun with that. And then, I know that folks, we've got some events coming up and some plans, but one of those is we're going to be streaming some Mutants and Masterminds on the 28th. That's tomorrow night. And we're going to start at 3 p.m. Pacific. But, the people who are going to be in the game, they're patrons. And we'll have a crew of people that are sort of inside watching from what we're calling the observation deck, and they're patrons as well of the Mutants and Masterminds patron. And You know, there's some folks that were talking about being interested in getting into the uh, Patreon for, age, and I got a maybe even a name kicking around, but we'll continue to explore that. In the interim, Owen, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and folks, we will
Thanks,
see
Troy.
you. Yeah, we'll see you next Thursday for ThursdAGE with Owen Casey Stevens. Bye bye.
Bye, folks.